So yes, welcome back everyone. Lovely to see you all here tonight. Like I said, third week in the series looking at the Genesis creation account. So let's quickly recap where we've gone so far in this series. Week one, we looked at the importance of that theological word exegesis, the fancy theological word meaning to read the text in the right context, which means we shouldn't read Genesis as it was written primarily for us, as if it was primarily written for us today. But instead we need to put ourselves in the shoes of an original hearer, an ancient Middle Eastern person, and first try to understand what this text would have meant to them. Remember the saying that if you take the text out of context, then all you're left with is a con. Okay? And that's how a lot of people feel about Genesis, that it is a con. But we need to read it in context to fully appreciate its beauty and majesty. Now, last week we did a big exploration through the other creation accounts that existed in ancient cultures at the time, because the Genesis account is not the first creation account we have in records of the world. Old civilizations had their own creation accounts. And with the Bible being a persuasive text that's trying to tell us a new truth, God's trying to show us a new truth, we need to compare the Genesis text to other creation texts and see the similarities, but more importantly, see the differences too. I gave the example last week that when Chloe and I make up fairy tales, we keep the traditional well-known story structure, but we like to change things up. Like, for example, the princess is the hero and the prince is the one that's helpless. And it's those differences where the key points are being made. I don't want Chloe growing up thinking she needs to be rescued because she's a princess. I want her to be maybe like a jiu-jitsu badass. And in the same way, the author of the Genesis accounts takes the traditional, well-known creative stories of the time and adds some new flavour to it. Instead of the gods fighting each other and creation coming out of these bloody battles, we have a single God who speaks creation into existence. Instead of humans being created as slaves to the gods and only kings and rulers being the image of the gods as the representatives of the gods, we have all human beings being created as God's representatives. All human beings, no matter how lowly, are made in the image of God. And instead of each day being uncertain, the gods needing our worship or needing to battle each other to make sure that tomorrow comes, we have a God who rests at the end of creation. Now, we also talked about the purpose of ancient creation accounts were to talk about how order came out of chaos, that all creation accounts start with a chaotic, unordered world and then describe how order came about. That was the key to the accounts, and to highlight and point to who these supreme beings or beings were that deserved our devotion, because without them, life would be chaos or disordered. Now, this week we're going to have a closer look at the text that we have in Genesis, and this isn't going to be a super exhaustive study because we could be here forever, but I would encourage you to do that in your own Bible study or in small groups. But I just want to point out some of the key things that jump out at me, or things that I found fascinating about the text, because I personally have gone from someone who tried to dismiss Genesis, or someone who tried to find as many flimsy excuses to account for Genesis, to someone who loves this text. And I'm hoping that you'll join me on that journey too. And at the same time though, we've got one more week to go in this series. Now you'll see up on the screen how to access Mentimeter. We've been using it each week, and in 2 weeks' time, when we come back to do the final week for this series, we're going to do it as a Q&A. I want you guys to send me through the questions that perhaps jump out at you, or that you want to have answered. Maybe it's an unanswered question from a previous week. And we do have some questions from those previous weeks that we'll look at too. But tonight it will raise more, which is great. But put your questions in as they jump out at you. I'll collate them, and that will make up the service in 2 weeks' time. You should see on your phone at each slide there will be an open Q&A button, and at any time you can click that and type in your questions. Okay? So, let's start at the very beginning. It's a very good place to start. Yeah, I got one laugh. That's it. All right, so we have the first line of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we've discussed in previous weeks that the Hebrew word for heavens means skies, and the word for earth means land. So once again, we need to get out of our 21st century mindset with our satellite images and deep space scans and planets and put ourselves in the shoes of an ancient Israelite who's never seen the blue globe and read, in the beginning, God created the skies and the land. It's interesting, I was reading the International Children Bible translation of the Bible, which is one of my favourite ones because it's much more plain English, and it says skies and land. Verse 2. The earth was form and without void. Now, without form and void are two rhyming words in Hebrew. Tohu vavohu. Can everyone say that? Vavohu, that's right. It means unordered and uninhabited. Okay, remember last week, unordered describes the chaotic nature of pre-creation, the thing that needs to be overcome. And the next line used as another image to say the same thing, that darkness was over the face of the deep. Because remember, last week again, I'm trying to recap last week as much as possible. In ancient cosmology, pre-creation is always described as these dark, deep, chaotic waters. So the Israelites are describing pre-creation like other cultures of the time. And darkness is a common motif, not just in ancient cultures, but throughout the Bible as well. It's used to represent chaos and unorder and death. I can just love that I see all these hearts just flying on the screen up there. This is an aside, but I think it was a couple of weeks ago, somebody else was preaching, and I was sitting behind Andy, and Andy was just there spamming the button. Oh my, good work, Andy. All right, still in verse 2. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, the Spirit is the Hebrew word ruach. Blow onto your hand. Actually, COVID, don't do that. Pretend that, yeah, you can. I did it. Now, it's the same word for breath and wind. Okay, you can't see it, but it's present. And that's what the text is describing, that in the midst of this darkness and chaos, the invisible presence of God is there, ready to bring order so that life can flourish. So, let's get to this ordering. We have 6 days of creation, and here comes the debates, okay? Smarter people than I debate this until the cows come home. What do the days represent? Are they literal 24-hour days? Are we looking at a young Earth or an old Earth? Do the days actually represent thousands of years or eons? Where are the freaking dinosaurs? The questions that always struck me, though, was why did it take God so long to create everything? Like the Bible, it's really clear in setting God up as this all-powerful being. And omnipotence is one of the core Christian and Jewish beliefs, so why did it take God so long? Like, surely he could speak one word and all of creation would come to be. And off that, does God have a mouth or hands to form humans, as we see later? Legs to walk in the garden? How tall is God? Lots of questions. Don't put them in the Q&A. But back to week 1. Perhaps we're asking the wrong questions. And here's what I think is important to get out of the days of creation. We're looking at how God takes the tohu vavohu, the unordered and uninhabited world, and makes it ordered and inhabited. And we have 6 days, and we're going to use this table that I've created to help highlight the design. So the first 3 days address the problem of unordered, of the tohu. And it does this by creating 3 ordered realms. The heavens above to give us order and time. The waters above and the waters below, what we call the sky and the ocean, and the land. And then days 4 to 6 address the uninhabited aspect of the world, the vavohu. The realm created in day 1 is inhabited in day 4. The realm created in day 2 is inhabited in day 5. And the realm created in day 3 is inhabited in day 6. And each day begins with the phrase, and God said, and then ends with the phrase, and there was evening and morning. Another hint, I personally don't think we're supposed to take these like as a chronology literally, because how can there be evening and morning when the sun isn't created until day 4? But anyway, day 1, let there be light. So God is creating day and night, establishing the order of time. So God himself provides the light of his divine glory that meets the darkness and fits it within the larger divine purpose. And John, when he talks about his creation story in the Gospel of John, talks about how Jesus is the Word and the light present from the beginning of creation, and that this light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. For day 2, it says, let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water. So what's the vault? Okay, it's the Hebrew word rakia. Other translations have this as canopy or a dome, or if you've got an old translation, a firmament. And this is where, once again, an ancient understanding of how an ancient Israelite viewed the world is really important. So here is a picture of ancient Israelite cosmology. This is how the ancient Israelites viewed the world. So the understanding of the time was that the sky was a solid dome or a firmament, in old time speak, that held back waters. Think of the universe as one big chaotic watery bath, and then inside that bath a big bubble is created, separating the waters. Okay? Or perhaps think of an underwater research station, a dome in the midst of the ocean where we can live. That's what's happening here. That there were these waters, and then God has separated the waters and put a vault in the skies. Okay? He's created a dome for life to exist. And that finalizes with land appearing. In day 3, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. So God is creating the realm of land, and it appears out of the chaotic waters. But then we also get a bonus creative act on day 3. God invites plants and fruit trees with seed to emerge out of the land. We'll come back to this in a sec. But to review, we've got the realm of time, we've got the realm of the sky and the seas, and the realm of the land. God has sorted the tohu of the tohu vavohu in verse 2. The unordered has now become ordered. And now it's time to address the vavohu, the uninhabited. So let's fill these realms that we've created, well, not we, the God has created on days 1 to 3 with inhabitants. And that happens on days 4 to 6. So day 4. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky. So God installs these lights, the sun, the moon, the stars, as signs and symbols that reflect God's own light. In the same way that God himself brought light into darkness on day 1, these lights bring light into the darkness of the earth on day 4. And then on day 5, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. So day 2, we had the sky and the ocean created, and now they get filled. We've got the fish that swim in the water below, and the animals, the birds that fly in the sky above. We're taking the realms and we're filling them. And day 6, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. Day 3, we had the realm of land created, now it gets filled with animals. But just like how there was a bonus act of creation on day 3, we get a bonus act of creation on day 6. God creates a special land creature, mankind, Hebrew, Adam, and then tying in the bonus act of creation on day 3, God provides all these fruit trees that were created as abundant food. So hopefully you can see from the table there, the days are linked. Like we've got day 1 and day 4, day 2 and day 5, day 3 and day 6, even the bonus creative acts of fruit trees and humans. I mean, it's not like there's big links to humans and fruit trees in the next few pages, is there? Anyway, hopefully you can see the literary design here. Realms are created, and then realms are filled. Unordered is ordered, uninhabited is then inhabited. And over again, God says that his creation is good. But then after making humans, he says that it is very good. Humans are the climax of creation, and their importance is explained in the first poem in the Bible. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. This means that together, all of humanity embody and represent the Creator within his creation. We are given the role or the task of overseeing and caring for the creation that God has just completed. We then have a summary conclusion line. This is where chapters can get a bit annoying. Really, this creation account ends in verse 3 of chapter 2. So we're jumping into chapter 2 now. I'm going to keep saying Genesis 1 though, because it's just easier. Okay? Okay, so summary conclusion line, chapter 2, verse 1, which I'll add to the table down the bottom there. Thus the heavens and the earth, the skies and the land, were completed, and all the host of them. This line is tying back to the opening introduction verses at the start of chapter 1. The tohu vavohu, the unordered and uninhabited, are now ordered and inhabited. And you think that that is where it would conclude. That's where other creation stories would conclude, except that there's one more day, and it sits outside the pattern of these 6 days. Day 7. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So we've got a God who rests on the seventh day. The Hebrew word is Shabbat. He Shabbat. He ceased from his work because it was completed. It's from the word Shabbat that we get the word for Sabbath. But there's another word for rest that gets picked up later on in the Torah. In Exodus 20, when they're discussing about this creation story, we have this verse where it says, "For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested." The Hebrew word here is NRUC, on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath, let's get that Shabbat, day, and made it holy. Like I said, a different word for rest here, NRUC. Now, NRUC, when we're talking about rest, means to take up residence in. Like if I'm going to lie down on the couch, it means that I'm going to go put my body, I'm going to put my presence on the couch and rest. When God or people NRUC, it always involves settling into a place that is safe, secure, and stable. So the picture we have here is that after ordering the cosmos, God comes to rest and dwell in his sacred space. And this is where, once again, I've said it a couple of times, I'm indebted to Hugh with regards to opening my eyes to the temple imagery in creation. It's like the whole world is a holy temple where God lives with his people. And that's what's picked up in the rest of chapter 2 with the Garden of Eden. And that's also what's picked up in the rest of the Bible. After the fall, how do we come to dwell? How do we come back to resting with God? And there's a huge tie-in with the purpose of the Sabbath every 7 days being to reflect us resting by ceasing, but also dwelling with God. But that's another sermon. Now, the phrase, "there was evening and there was morning," that was present in all the other days of creation is not present on day 7. Okay? And that's because the seventh day has no end. Genesis 1 is describing God's ideal vision for the whole cosmos, a place where God lives with his people to rule the world in harmony together. And this idea of creation as God's temple gets picked up in the rest of the Bible, and this pattern of sevens, the literary design that we see in Genesis, continues throughout the rest of the Bible whenever it's describing temples. So, for example, each later temple, the seventh day is when God's presence fills the sacred space. And like I said, each temple creation follows this pattern that has been set up. So if we look at this table, if you can, maybe you see it better on the phone, I don't know. In Genesis, we have 7 days that open with a divine command, and God said. In Exodus 25 to 31, when the tabernacle instructions are given, we have 7 speeches that open with the divine command, and Yahweh spoke to Moses. In Exodus 39 and 40, when the tabernacle is completed, we have 7 acts of obedience to the divine command to complete the tabernacle. And Moses did just as Yahweh commanded Moses. And in 1 Kings 6 to 8, after 7 years of building the temple, we have 7 petitions of Solomon upon completion of the temple. Blessed be Yahweh who spoke to my father David. There is an incredible literary design in the Bible, and it starts on the first page. It's set up on the first page. Now, if your mindset is limited to thinking that Genesis 1 is like video camera footage, it's just about the material origins of the universe, then God's creating is an action that's in the past that's now over and done with. That God created the physical universe, and now the cosmos exists. But if you view Genesis 1 as an ancient account of the cosmos's functional origins, who do we look for order? Where do we find our purpose? Then we also see that God's rest is ongoing, and God is still active in our world today. See, Genesis 1 has been designed to show us that God's purpose is to share creation with his images, with us, so that we can rest and rule it forever with him. And that purpose is what the rest of the biblical drama is all about. But man, I hope that you can see the Genesis 1 for the creative work of brilliance that it is. I know that was a lot of brain stuff in one go, so we'll leave it there for tonight. But I hope you put some questions into the Q&A. I can see that there's some in there already. That's awesome. Like I said, we're going to take a break next week and we're going to do a community Sunday. We're going to get together and share some meals together and have some discussions. But then the week after that, we'll be back and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Now, I've loved doing this series. I think it's really good to bite your teeth into some text and just tear it apart. And I pray that you have found it helpful too. And I pray that you'll join us next week and the week after. But in the meantime, thanks, Lucas. We'll sing our last song.